Hey, this is Patrick from Frontly. In this video, I'm going to do an overview of all of Frontly's blocks, which are the key building blocks of your page. And so if you want to go into Frontly's editor mode, you just toggle this button here. By default, you're in the AI Copilot mode, and if you click Show Settings, then you get taken over to the more granular kind of page editor where you get to manually make changes. Now, you'll always see these blocks up here. These are sort of like the most common ones, and so that's why we added them here. But at any time, you can just hit the More button, and you'll see our block browser. So we actually have about, let's see, maybe around 12 or 15 blocks. And although it's a relatively small number of blocks, they're very specifically chosen to be able to give you ultimate flexibility. So in this basic section up here, you'll find blocks that generally don't have a lot of functionality, but combined can create almost any visual interface. So we have a container, which is essentially nothing. It has no shape or size. You can give it, you can give it a height and a width, and you can see it's still basically just nothing. And that's very intentional because a lot of the time you're going to have what we would call rows and columns of content. So let's say you have a container. Right now, again, it's essentially bare bones, no real style or anything. Now, if I want to drag something, I can do it right from here, or I can do it from inside this More tab, but I could drag a button right inside of that column. And if I want to do that again, I can just keep dragging. Now, you'll notice once you have basically any item and you want to do a drag, you'll actually see this drop indicator that shows you where something's going to go. And depending on the complexity of your interface, it can get pretty confusing sometimes. But if you ever feel like you're in a position where you're not sure, this drag and drop isn't working perfectly for you, we also have this layers panel, which gives you this hierarchical overview of your entire layout. And there's a few cool features in here. One of them is the ability to sort of drag and reorder things, just kind of depending on what you need to do. So I can, maybe move my text there. I think most of the time you can just do it in the visual editor. This can be useful when you're moving kind of containers around and you just want to see how things are laid out. Now, back to my container block. So now that I have a few items in it, I can work on the styles a bit more. Now that I have items, I actually don't think I want there to be a specific 500 pixel height or even necessarily a width. Maybe I just want to start setting the padding, which is the spacing around the items in the container. And then I can do a border or I can do a background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a white background. And then actually I'll do a light gray so we can see it a little bit more. So I'll do a light gray background, and then I'm going to give it a 1 pixel border, and I will make that a slightly darker gray. So you can see here we're starting to get something a bit more visually obvious. Now, border radius is really cool. It allows you to add rounded borders to things. This is kind of a nice modern way you'll see in a lot of modern designs. It's just friendly rounded cards, things like that. And of course, every single block that we have is quite stylable. So I can increase the size, I can increase the boldness, and if I want to start creating something even more sophisticated, I can add yet another container inside this existing container. So there's no limit to the amount of what we call nesting within these containers. So this is where the layers panel can be really useful. I have this container, but because there's no content in it, it's not really taking up any space. But now what I can do is I can drag a button inside of this container. I can actually drag both the buttons inside. So although without any other settings, that doesn't really make much of a difference. Now I can go to my container. I can adjust the orientation to row. And now within this container, which is a vertical stacked container column, now this container is a row inside of it. So you can start to really get a sense of how customizable this is. You can actually build pretty much anything visual inside Frontly. And so another example is the icon block. It's very simple. It allows you to select an icon from a large list of these two primary icon libraries. Maybe I want this cool arrow icon, and then if I go into the styles, I can adjust the height of the icon, so I can make it much bigger. And Now if we go back to my container, I can start to think about the layout even more. So these two things here were kind of full width and they were stretching the container size. But because the icon is smaller than the width of the container, we're now seeing it's sort of adjusted. It's sitting on the left side. If we want to make a change to that, there's the setting called Align Items. And you can see it shows you a little bit of a preview here. You can align things to the right, to the left, center. Center is really nice for cards and things like this, especially if you wanted this to be more like an image preview. And then there's also this justify content, which in this specific case, I don't think this makes any difference. But what I'll do is I'm going to go make this container bigger again. I'll say 500 pixels in height. And now I think I'll be able to showcase what the justify content does. So you can see by default, it's aligned to the top. I can align it to the center, to the bottom, or I can do space between or space around. Now these are subtle differences, but you can see just by playing around with it that it does make a big difference. And so this is something that, you know, is very common in modern layouts. And of course, our AI Copilot understands these things and can, for the most part, help you build these designs. But it's nice to know how it works, and it's nice to be able to make manual tweaks. So these are all what I would call the sort of simple primitive blocks. They don't have a lot of functionality. Now the button, of course, does have at least a click action. So I can click on the button, I can click on that click action setting, and now I'm in Frontly's multi-step action builder. So you'll see there's just one step right now, and I get to pick what it is. We have, I guess, around 20 or so action types. And so we could navigate to a page when the user clicks on this button. And so I have all my pages in my app. I can click my cool robotics landing page. And if I want, I can even add these URL parameters to add kind of special tags to the URL. But in this case, that's all I really need to do. And if I wanted to, I could even add another step, and these will run in sort of a sequence. So I could add a notification, or I could send an email or something like that. And really, we'll do a whole video on actions, so I won't go into it much deeper here, but you can kind of get a sense of how that works. Now, these are the simple blocks. The data blocks, it's a separate category because all of these connect to a database and then display data in one way or another, or connect to that database. So I'm just going to refresh the page just to kind of get rid of my content, go back to the basics. Now, we have the form, which when you add this data block, it's always going to ask you to select a data source. So let's say I have my fitness activities database, and I'm going to hit complete setup. But there is an option to say I want to edit records, or I just want to create records, or there's even a custom form where you define your own fields. Now, in this case, these fields are just automatically pulled from the database that I selected. So my fitness activities, that's all populated, and you can just as easily change it. So I can say, actually, I want this to be my job descriptions form. You can see how everything jumps over right away. And now I can start going in and I can say, actually, I don't want this date posted field to be there. Or, maybe I want this description field. I want this to be a text area. So it's like a larger text. And I want it to take up 2 spaces, 2 columns widthwise instead. So now it actually looks a little bit nicer because these fields sort of make sense to be a bit smaller. And then this is a nice big description field. If I want, I can go and say, I want this department field to be a multi-select. So now I can add some options and I can say, marketing, sales, you name it, right? I'll just leave it at those 2 for now. But you can see we have, this drop down. So very, very easy to manually customize this stuff. And the best part is if I hit save and I went and preview this right now, filling out this form would create a new record in my job descriptions table, and I wouldn't have to do anything else. And of course, you can edit the label here. So I could call this, create a job description. All right, so that's the form. Now I can also delete this just by clicking the delete button when it's selected, and I can create a table, which is really, really simple. Just displays your data like this. Of course, there are a few customization options. you can, just like the other blocks, you can hide certain columns. You can decide to maybe change the column type. In this case, I can make this a badge, and then it looks kind of nice, and it will automatically generate unique colors for the unique values in that table. And then tables and some of the other ones have these built-in search and filter options as well. So this is really useful. Your end users, whoever's using your app, is able to sort of filter the data and search. Very convenient. So I'll go over a few other data blocks here. The list is a custom list of data. And so it's kind of a vague name, this list, because it's actually very flexible. So I won't go into the deep details of this, but you can completely customize the content of this card. So all you have to do is, you'll see in the list that only the first card is customizable because it's going to multiply it for every record in your database. In this case, I only have these 6 records, but it would be going through all of them. And so I can just drag a button like right from here and put it into my card, and now it's on every card. And one concept that you'll want to really understand in Frontly is we have this variable system. So, a lot of the time you have what's called static text, which is just, it literally says what it says. It would say something like, card label. That's what it's going to say. But in an app, a lot of the time you actually want this to be dynamic, which means it's going to be pulling values for each card. The values are going to be different. So we have this button here, you'll see in a lot of fields throughout Frontly, that we call the variable injector, or the insert variable pop-up. And it's going to show you which variables are available. And in this case, I want to select the record variable. This allows me to see all the fields in my current data source that's connected to this list. And now I can decide what I want to display. So maybe I want the department to be there, and I want the description to be there. And so you can see how easy that is to just jump that right in. For the button, this actually probably makes more sense for it to be just static text. So I should probably say, learn more or something like that. And of course, because Frontly's system is very much based on core kind of styling concepts, you can pretty much change the styles of anything. So in this case, maybe I want to say my button should be 100% width. Now you can see that. I think that looks a little bit nicer. Now, if we wanted to, we can really start to adjust things. We can say, actually, let's make these cards 350 pixels. And, in this case, I think we could go to this text here. We can make it bigger, but we can also set it to be what we call have a character limit. So let's say I want, well, that's too short, but maybe I just want there to be kind of a nice sort of standardized little piece of text. Now I know that kind of no matter how long that text is, it's not going to take up more than one line. These are all just little things you can do to customize your app. And now in the list in particular, if you want to go a bit deeper, this is where, this does get a bit more technical, but again, the AI Copilot can handle a lot of this. You can actually go in and you can make some adjustments to the core block. And when you do that, it's going to be adjusting how this is all laid out. In this case, you actually don't need to go into the CSS panel. You can do it yourself manually here. So check this out. Right now we're in row format. So you can see it's going this way, and we have this flex wrap feature, which tells the system that it's allowed to wrap onto a new line. If we turn that off, you'll see that everything is squashed into one line, which isn't perfect. And there's, kind of other ways to handle this, but let's say I want to make this a column, and instead of it being 20 pixels of gap between them, I'm going to add, so now it's a little bit more space here. And now if I go to the card itself, I could say, you know what, I actually want this to be 100% width. So you can just imagine how, all the different interfaces you can build. And now maybe I want the font size of this button to be bigger, and yeah, you can have a lot of fun with this stuff. So anyway, these are some of these core blocks. Now, before I end this video, I'm just gonna go over 2 more, I think, which is the calendar, and there's the Kanban. So the Kanban is very, very similar to the list, except for it requires you to select a status field, and then you'll see this kind of standard interface here where it looks a little bit better when you only have a few columns, but you can actually visually drag and drop these cards between these different statuses, and it will update that automatically in your database. So generally used for project management, things like that. Very convenient, and Frontly handles all that logic for you. You just have to select your data source, and just like the list, you can go in and completely customize the content and the styling of these cards. And if you are interested in the CSS, you can actually edit almost all the styles of this stuff. So I'm just going to delete this Kanban. We're going to move on. Now we have the calendar, which let's see. So I'm going to make sure I have a data source here that actually has some dates in it. Let's see, birthday event calendar. Yeah, that'll probably do it. So as you can see, it's prompting me to select which field in my database that I've selected is the relevant date field that I want to use in my calendar. So you can see that just from doing that, because this is a data source that was recently generated, all the dates are in this month, May 2025, and so you can see that the dates are appearing on this nice visual calendar. And you can, in real time, you or your users can go through, they can go through the months. We even have like a week calendar as well, where you can see more like the actual, if there are hours associated with your event times, you can use that. That's very cool. And this field here is, I guess it just kind of defaults to just saying event, but if I select the event label, now I can actually see whose birthday it is on the calendar. So very, very easy to set up. Now there's another block called the timeline, which is kind of similar to the calendar, but a little bit different. So what we're going to see here is it very, very similar setup. I'm going to select my birthday date. Now in this case, it's a horizontal calendar, which is also known as, I think, like a Gantt chart. You might see these in other services, and so pretty common. Now it probably doesn't make the most sense to use for a data set this small, but it can be quite useful. Again, I can select the event label, so I can start to see that, and then there are different timelines you can select. Now in this case, this probably isn't the best data set. It would be better if you had, maybe lots of projects or something like that. You want to see them over a longer timeline, but you can adjust the time unit between day, week, month, and year. So really just depends on your data set. And if you do have some kind of grouping, like some kind of category or something like that, you can select that here. And then what it'll do is it's going to essentially break it all down by that category. So also very useful. All right, so I think that's enough blocks to cover in one video, but I hope that helps orient you about Frontly's features. And there's a lot more to explore, especially in our action system, where you can create logic and all the things you can do with the AI Copilot. So thanks for watching.